United States Olympic Committee Training Design Symposium. 2008. Gloria Balague, Ph.D. Periodization of Psychological Skills Training. This original lecture was about an hour and 20 minutes long, and these are the audio notes. Balague works at UIC, or the University of Illinois Chicago, and also works for USA Track and Field. Periodization, definition 1. Structuring training phases that lead to highest levels of speed, strength, and endurance. Definition number 2. The division of the annual plan to ensure optimal performance for the main competitions. Tudor Bumper, 1999. Psychological skills training goals. Psychological skills training, or PST, can give the athlete consistency, increase self-control, and give the athlete independence while performing versus depending on coach to perform at competitions. PST, or psychological skills training, also helps athletes test their limits, take risks, and explore new skills, ideas, and concepts. Classification of skills by Robin Veely. Foundation skills. The skills you need no matter what. That is, motivation or achievement drive, self-awareness, productive thinking, and self-confidence. Motivation must come from within. That is, if an athlete does not want it, it will not come. Coaches can enhance or take away motivation, but cannot give it. Self-awareness is knowing what is the optimal psychological state for competing. What do you focus on, and when do you do well? What is the right level of tension for you? Balague believes athletes should know the answers to the questions to perform at high levels consistently, and coaches are the main PST teachers on a daily basis. Productive thinking. Thinking right in sport. April Heinrich quote, "We want self-confidence, competent, independent, high-performing athletes." I believe April Heinrich was the 1996 soccer coach that won the Olympic Games. Psychological skills are trainable with the exception of motivation. Motivation can be enhanced or taken away. And if athlete doesn't care or like or want or desire to achieve, it may be better to move on. Training takes time, effort, persistence, and intelligence. So just a quick review of some of the concepts we've gone over so far. Essentially, she gives a definition for periodization by Tudor Bumper. Again, Tudor Bumper wrote a book about periodization called Periodization. You could probably Google that and then look him up and then get more information on that. The concepts of motivation, she, or Balague, has kind of given several different instances or examples of how motivation cannot necessarily be given to somebody. It can be enhanced, it can be taken away, but ultimately that drive has to come from within. I point that out because early on as a coach, I did not necessarily really understand that, but if I really focus and take a look back at my career, I was the one that was driven to become a wrestler. I was the one that wanted to be a state champion. I was the one that put in all the time and effort and energy of listening and understanding and comprehending what my coach was saying. Nobody made me do that. And when I clearly look at my past, it's clear to me now. As a young coach, though, I kind of forgot all of that. I forgot that all of the drive has to come from within. Of course, we can enhance that drive. We can, fortify that drive. But if that drive isn't there, it's very difficult to get anybody to do anything. Again, I'm pointing that out because I think a lot of times parents actually push students into sport or into whatever, and then they expect the child to vicariously do what they want to actually do. Sometimes, in other words, the parent actually wants to be the champion versus the child. And I think early on, that's like the first concept that I really think needs to be expressed and kind of listened to and learned, not only as parents, not only as coaches, but as people that are going to be leading young people. Performance skills. Athletes need to train speed of decision making and right attention and focus to compete at high levels consistently. Energy management is also trainable, and this is managing right mental intensity in training and competition. Managing high or low energy between rounds or prior to competing, and being able to group down as needed. Personal development skills. Athletes are people and not just athletes. Coaches can help them know who they are as they progress and mature. Athlete is one piece of the pie of the person. The rest is very important too. Taking this concept into consideration will help coaches coach better and athletes perform better. Interpersonal competence is how well athletes relate or pick up cues from others, or social intelligence and how athletes respond when communicating with others, which is a major life skill too. Team skills are leadership, cohesion, communication, and team confidence. That is, excellent coaches coach the whole person, not just the athlete. Excellent coaches coach the whole person and develop athletes through the phases they are at. Balague suggests the most successful coaches say the athletes develop great relationships and invite them to weddings, and versus saying, I coach X athlete to gold medal. Excellent coaches can have an unbelievable impact on their athletes, which is a great opportunity and responsibility. Sometimes this creates jealousy among parents. So I'm just going to review some of that material there because, man, that's like the crux of coaching in general, understanding that the athlete is more than just an athlete. If you use a pie example, if you cut a pie up into eighths, maybe 1/8 of that pie is an athlete. Another eighth of that pie maybe is the person who wants to become a doctor or a lawyer or be an academician. Another piece of that pie is building relationships with their teammates. Another piece of that pie, it goes on and on. I guess the point I'm making there is it's not just, you're not just developing an athlete, you're developing the whole person, and we have to be aware of that as coaches and parents actually to understand that so that we can explain that to the athletes and the students. Just like they would be studying very many different disciplines academically, we need to be, looking at them as a person in the same kind of way, and as much as they're not just studying to be a good athlete, but they're studying to be very good humans. The other concept that I want to point out is when I finally really discovered that at the United States Olympic Education Center, it's like my coaching sword. Not only was I, teaching them how to be good athletes, but I had to take care of them too. I had to look after them. In my case, I actually had 15-year-olds at the Olympic Training Center, around 22 and 23 and 24 and up to 28. I actually had I think a 27-year-old on my team at the same time I had a 15-year-old. Now, mind you, that's, those are completely different maturity levels and, experiences of life. My point to that is not only did I have to be a coach, but I also had to be a father figure, also had to be a guardian, also had to be their friend in some cases, although being a friend to an athlete is not, the only piece of the pie, if you will, if you go back to that pie analogy. So essentially, once I kind of discovered that concept in terms of building more than just the athlete, I started to become more of what I like to call a sports psychologist coach, where I'm looking at other areas that are actually going to have a big impact on their life, and of course, sport is a part of their life. PST, or Psychological Skills Training Program Elements. Requirements of sport. What does the athlete need? All athletes are different, as are sports. And requirements of training phase. Most times PST is done by someone else besides the coach at start of season. This PST may be less effective than the entire season or year. Bompa's training factors. Again, Tudor Bompa wrote a book called Periodization, a pyramid from top to bottom. PST is at the top, tactical training in the middle, technical training along with tactical training, and physical training. Balague suggests PST must be throughout season and career, reflecting on the pyramid shape of Bompa's model with PST at the top. Balague's point is, or to place PST throughout a periodized season or career. Example, during general prep phases, motivation, pain tolerance, self-efficacy, and self-awareness can be trained. During specific prep phase, kinesthetic control and awareness, increased efficacy, and emotional control can be trained. During pre-comp phase, optimal arousal levels, optimal focus, cognitive and emotional control, and self-efficacy can be trained. All athletes are different, so coaches need to be flexible and teach model flexibility as well. So I just gave a bunch of examples of different periodization parts of the season. starting with general prep, specific prep phase, and competition phase as an example. Those are three phases. A fourth phase could be transition, and suggesting that there are different psychological skills training that you can be training throughout to go along with Balague's proposal. To train and teach all of the above-mentioned psychological requirements, coaches can use goal setting, focus, imagery, energy management, self-talk, and performance planning. Balague suggests teaching and training PST when it makes sense. That is, relaxation training or energy management after a very intense training session, or when athletes are already tired. Or teach training and self-control during or after a strength and conditioning session that focuses on power cleans. Example, self-control, relaxation training, energy management, and self-awareness are all trained when athletes are coached to relax parts of their body, not in use during power cleans, like clenching jaws or making whole body contracted, or use too much or not enough energy right before and after executing a power clean. So the idea there is to, teach psychological skills training when they're actually happening, right? So when you're doing a power clean, as an example, when you're clenching your teeth and, biting down and making your jaws tight, that's actually a waste of energy. So you can explain to the athlete, okay, relax your jaws, relax your teeth, focus on doing whatever the components of a power clean are. And that's an example of how to teach a specific portion of psychological skills training based on whatever exercise you're doing. And I guess the point for me that I take from that is we can teach psychological skills training in the appropriate time and manner. So if we're going to teach goal setting, maybe we could say, goals are X, Y, and Z, and each one of you should have a goal before each practice starts. You could say that at the beginning of a practice. Or, okay, now we're going to work on, finishing this particular technique, and then you could say to the athletes again, what are your goals? What are your goals going to be for this particular part of the practice? So they are learning how to set goals when it's appropriate. They are learning how to relax when it's appropriate, and you can use the rest, and you can fill in the blank to create other examples of when psychological skills training are important. Most training provides a lab of controlled subjects. That is, coaches design training and can execute psychological skills training when athletes have negative thoughts, images, self-talk, words, and replace these negative psychological skills training, or PST, with positive and productive thoughts, images, and words. Coaches' focus or imagery or self-talk may not work for all athletes, and coaches' charge is to help athletes discover what focus, self-talk, and images work best for them, and this can be done during training and competitions. Coaches must be aware of differences of individuals, meet them where they are, and teach PST on an individual basis. So that concept there, I think, is throughout any type of teaching and coaching of anything. Generally, you'll have what I like to call a cookie cutter system in terms of teaching and coaching anything, and then the very good coaches and the very good teachers understand that each student is going to be an individual, and each student is going to maybe possibly have a different learning style, and we as coaches and teachers need to read the athlete and be able to understand what teaching or coaching style is going to work best for that student. In other words, what works for one athlete may not necessarily work for another athlete or student. So it's up to the coaches to kind of really be paying attention and see if the athletes are getting it. One way that I do that is to ask, okay, what does that mean to you? And clearly, if they're not on, track with what you think that means or what it means to them, you can actually help them understand it by saying, okay, this is what I actually mean, and then ask them again, what does that mean to you? Ultimately, when they start to get a little bit closer to what your definition is, they may actually understand it. That's an example of trying to get the athlete to see what you see and or, individualizing the training per that athlete. Video review is a great tool for teaching PST via self-awareness, focus, and emotional control. Coaches giving feedback on improvements helps build confidence, and athletes can be trained to keep training logs, journals, to record this same feedback, which will literally show them growth and development. Another thing that I do along those same lines, going back to something earlier with the appropriateness of teaching any psychological skills training, is I'll teach an athlete how to do something and I'll use a term, and then I'll say right after that, first you have to actually explain what self-talk is, and then you can explain, you can use self-talk or self-instruction or self-coaching to use the same terms that I'm using as you're going through the skill. So you're using cue words to precisely get the athlete to follow along when you're teaching it, and then you tell the athlete, now use self-instruction or self-talk or self-coaching to use those cue words to help guide you through the move. In fact, every time you do a move, have your brain focused on those cue words. That actually will help them develop the awareness and identify what self-talk is and why it's important, and it will teach them how to teach themselves versus you constantly having to repeat precisely what's going on. Once they know what those cue words are, then the progression, of course, they can teach themselves, and ultimately they can teach other people as well. Athletes can also be taught to evaluate competitions by using evaluation forms for competitions and question and answer sessions with coach. Rest and recovery or energy management can also be taught to all athletes during and after competitions or during training camps. That is, athletes can be taught when and how to relax or energy for optimal performance. Essentially, PST covers a wide range, can be taught and trained throughout the season annually based on periods of season and situations that happen during those periods or phases. Team sports. A group is a team. That is, parents, administration, coaches, sponsors, even individual sports are a group or a team. Phases of group development: forming, storming, norming, and performing. All groups follow these normal phases of development. Coaches should want their groups to go through storming phase, learn from it, move on. It's normal. Forming. Every season is a new group. Many athletes may not openly ask these questions, though they exist. Example: why are we here? What are our goals? Am I included? How do I fit in? Everyone in group is needed, or leader must recognize and acknowledge each individual as important. Storming. Groups will test limits and may be asking these questions to self or group, verbally or with actions. Who has the power? How is discipline applied? What happens if I do not go along? How much power do I have? Leaders should teach and allow conflict resolution plus value differences respectfully. Norming. In this phase, group asks, who are we? How do we function? Can we learn to work together? Do we contribute? How are we similar? Leaders should help set up culture, traditions, and promote team spirit. After good training sessions, coach can ask, what made that session good? And can we train like this again? Athletes can be made aware of good work ethic and smart training. Coaches can ask group what they want to be. Then during adversity, ask again, are we meeting our goals of whatever the goals were? This approach may be more successful than screaming, yelling at group during adversity. It's important that groups know, understand, and recognize their goals daily. How was the warm-up? Whose responsibility is it? If you are flat, ask questions to recognize goals. Coaches can create themes or do something that promotes culture, tradition. This could be motivating. Performing. Important for coaches to get out of way and give up some control based on age and maturity. Coach or leader must watch out for complacency and should allow for input from group or team. So I'm just going to review that phases of group development again: forming, storming, norming, and performing. So those are something that I was not completely, absolutely aware of as I was a beginning coach, as I started to study all of these materials from the Olympic Training Center, or United States Olympic Committee, and I became more aware. And of course, after you become aware of something, unless you've got some type of injury in your brain, very difficult to become unaware of it. So here's an example of how this forming, storming, norming, and performing can actually work. One of my teams at the United States Olympic Education Center, and this probably happened every year, and then I actually started, better understanding how group dynamics worked. I recognized what was going on, and I told the team, hey, this is normal. And then I basically went through, there's a slideshow that goes along with this presentation that I'm showing you here. I basically went through this forming, storming, norming, and performing with the whole group because they were having some issues. They were in the storming phase, and I'm like, initially, team, we form as a team, and then you're all together, everything is happy, and it's kind of like you're in a honeymoon setting, if you can follow that marriage analogy. And then there's a storming phase where everything appears to be going wrong. Tension can build, and there can be all kind of, fights that are going on within the team, verbal fights, that is. And then we get to norming phase, and then we'll go to the performing phase. And when I explain to them, okay, this is the beginning of the season, probably like November. If we started like in September or August, about October, November, we had the storming phase. When I explain to them, this is a normal part of group dynamics, and you're eventually going to get to this norming phase. Once they kind of understood that, it eased some of the tension that was going on through the team, and then it became the norming phase, and then it was time to perform. That happens just about every year on every team. In fact, every type of group that you have, those are the, according to Balague, she's done research that suggests these stages are actually going to happen in every single group. And my point is, as coaches, once we kind of understand those phases are actually going to happen, and you'll get more or less depending on the age and maturity of the team, and you'll, be at one end of the spectrum or the other in terms of going through those stages. The point is, you're going to go through those stages, and it's normal. After you understand it's normal, you can explain that to your team as they go through it, and then you can tailor your training design, because that actually is going to happen. Critical questions asked for great team experiences. Generally, athletes will ask self or friends about the conditions or questions. Do I know what is expected of me by coaches and team? Do I have what I need to train and compete on this team? Do I have the opportunity to do what I best regularly? In the last week, have I received recognition or praise for doing well? Do my coaches seem to care about me as a person? Do I have coaches and teammates who encourage my development? The more of these questions answered yes, the better the climate of the team. New technique can be described as successful just by trying it. This redefinition of success will increase success or trying new technique. Other questions that are critical include, do my opinions count? Does the mission of team coaches make me feel my role is important? Are my teammates committed to doing quality training and preparation? Do I have a best friend on the team? In the last month, has a coach talked to me about progress? This season, I have had the opportunity to grow, or have I had the opportunity to grow? Conclusion. PST must be integrated with physical training. Psychologist is, as a consultant to coach, is optimal. That is, coach's job daily to employ psychological skills training, or PST. Psychologists need solid knowledge of sports sciences and sports-specific training if you employ one. That is, just being a psychologist may not make a good sports psychologist. So those last set of questions there are, questions that I, early on as a coach, that it would never even entered my mind. As I became more experienced, these are some of the things that I looked out for. And when we become, again, I'd like to really just kind of overstate this and reemphasize it and say it again and again and again. As we become more adept at coaching, there are a lot of other areas that are beyond just the athletic prowess and teaching athletes technical and tactical skills, like the psychological dimension. Again, I use the analogy of a pie with coaches in terms of information that they need to have a very good solid foundation of. One of them is psychological skills training. One of them is sports nutrition. One of them is technical and tactical training. One of them is strength and conditioning. One of them is communication, which could be lumped in with psychological skills training. So I'm just giving an example of areas where we actually have to develop to become very, very good coaches. And the last set of questions actually alludes to things that we have to be thinking out in order to get the best out of our athletes and help them reach their maximum potential. The other area that I think is really important that came up in this last segment was the redefinition of success, because a lot of athletes, for whatever reason, will be fearful of trying new technique, especially younger athletes, because they know this technique works. And it doesn't even matter what sport, but because I'm a wrestling coach, I'll use wrestling as an example. If I have a double leg and I can do that really well, that may be the only skill that I use, or more even to the, over to the other side of the spectrum, if I can use a headlock as a younger wrestler and that works, I may not develop any other skills. And coaches have to, express that you have to be diverse in your technique, because if you've only got one technique, everyone knows that thing's coming. Now, how do you actually grow and develop as a wrestler? So we got to say, just trying new moves is actually going to make you a better wrestler. If they understand that at an early age, this is actually how champions actually continue to get better and better and better and better and better. Not the champion in the sense that they're winning every single medal that's, on the planet, but they're trying new things all the time. That's, to me, is the essence of growth and development, which is a psychological skill. And ultimately, I believe coaches need to be really adept at psychological skills training.